Claude Projects, the plain version. This is a strictly operational walkthrough of how the software actually works. Many professionals write the same kind of document every week: the Monday investor update, the Friday client digest, or the monthly board memo. These have the same structure, the same audience, and the same style as the week before. The only variables are the new numbers and a fresh headline. Standard generative AI interfaces struggle with this routine because they are episodic. Every time you open a new chat window, the system starts completely blank, with no memory of how you worked 5 minutes ago. Overcoming that amnesia requires a heavy manual setup task. First, you have to track down and re-upload last week's completed report just to show the system the structural formatting it needs to carry over. Next, you have to paste in the house style guide to keep the tone right. Then, you write out a long prompt explaining that the audience is the executive team, that they scan for headline risk, and that a good output is exactly 250 words. This chart maps the reality of that process. You lose 20 full minutes to repetitive context reloading before the drafting phase begins. Because this setup resets to 0 every Monday, it creates friction that keeps the AI from operating as a seamless production asset. Claude Projects replaces this episodic amnesia with a persistent operational environment. It is a stateful workspace where the AI retains the rules. To make this work, there is one organizational rule. You build exactly one project workspace for every recurring document type. By isolating your context loading into a single, one-time architectural setup inside that specific project, the weekly setup tax is eliminated. We are going to look closely at the technical architecture of this environment, the 3 strict setup habits required to build it, and the exact mathematical time payoff it delivers. Moving to a stateful workspace shifts the human operator's role. You stop repeating the same instructions and start acting as a high-leverage editor. In the software interface, a project is an isolated workspace. You access it directly from the main left sidebar navigation. Inside that workspace, the right rail houses the knowledge base, acting as the static repository for all persistent files the document will always need. Above that is the custom instructions panel. This serves as the permanent container for your operational rules. The baseline capacity of the default knowledge base holds 200,000 tokens of active context. When your uploaded files push past that threshold, the system triggers an automatic retrieval mode. Capacity expands roughly 10 times, keeping document recall sharp. In March 2026, Anthropic moved its massive 1 million token context window down to the standard pricing tier. Practically, 1 million tokens means an entire financial quarter's worth of past weekly reports can live simultaneously in the active memory of a single project. Rather than relying on isolated snapshots of past data, the AI references your historical library to inform its logic. The first habit requires building the foundational architecture by loading the right rail knowledge base. You should adhere to an operational rule of 3 files. This constraint ensures the system has enough context to write effectively while keeping retrieval accurate. File 1 is the template, establishing your structural baseline. File 2 is the data source, the master reference for pulling numbers. File 3 is the house style guide, explicitly dictating your required tone, jargon, and formatting rules. The system accepts standard document formats, including PDF, Word, CSV, plain text, and HTML, with a 30 megabyte limit per file. By dragging and dropping these 3 specific files into the knowledge base, you hard-code the structural and tonal requirements into the system. Habit 2 is drafting the custom instructions. Think of this field as your persistent one-page operational brief. Aim for roughly 200 words. This length is short enough to keep instruction density high, preventing the model from losing track of core constraints. You must explicitly define the operational roles under the persona. Establish that the AI is the primary writer and that you are the final editor. Next, define your audience. Detail exactly who consumes the document and how they read it. If the executive team scans for headline numbers, specify that. Finally, define your output standards. Dictate success metrics, like a 250-word limit, a requirement for calm prose, and a strict ban on emojis. Because you save this brief at the project level, every new chat session you open inside this workspace inherits these guardrails automatically. By baking the prompt into the system architecture, you stop explaining yourself every Monday. The output quality adheres to a consistent standard. Habit 3 covers the weekly execution phase. This relies on keeping your fresh weekly inputs separated from your persistent architectural rules. When Monday morning arrives, you open your initialized project workspace and click New Chat. Here is the rule. Drop this week's fresh data file directly into the active chat box, not into the static knowledge base. Since the system already knows the rules, your execution prompt is reduced to a single, simple sentence. Here is this week's data. Draft this week's report. The first draft returns instantly. Because project settings are persistent, the output arrives mapped perfectly to the specific tone, length, and format defined during setup. You skip structural formatting and move straight into editorial mode, issuing targeted, iterative commands. You direct the AI like a trusted junior writer. You ask it to tighten paragraph 2, swap a bulleted list for a single summary sentence, or insert a specific named example from a meeting. This execution model shifts the burden of structural generation to the system. The user's role is narrowed to rapid, targeted editing. This equation represents the final operational payoff of the persistent architecture, a measurable recovery of time. The old baseline was 90 minutes lost every week, 20 minutes of setup, 40 minutes of drafting, and 30 minutes of manual edits. The stateful workflow collapses that cycle to 15 minutes. You drop in the raw data, run the one-sentence prompt, and apply light edits. If you build just one project per recurring document type, you recover between 3 to 5 hours across a standard working week. That recovered time allows you to shift your cognitive effort back to analyzing the actual business numbers, rather than spending hours typesetting a document around them. The final operational step remains unchanged. Once the text is approved, you export it out of the Claude environment. The workflow ends where it always did, delivering the final document to the executive or client via your standard channels. This structural deep dive is the first installment of our 8-part Claude Ecosystem series. In the coming weeks, we will cover the mechanics of skills, code, plugins, design, artifacts, Chrome, and MCP. Plain Bureau explains AI tools in plain English. No jargon, no hype.